the biggest thing for me getting used to was no longer ever having the house to myself. And that silence, that space, that silence space. And I would say that, yeah, that for me is what I associate with having space.
Well, pre-COVID, I just think of that really nostalgically now because I had a routine of sorts. So once Beatrice was at school, I and Stefan had disappeared to do whatever he was doing. The day would be, or a good part of the day would be mine.
I would get up in the morning and get myself ready, obviously, Poppy ready for school, give her breakfast and everything. And either myself or Mark would drop her off at school.
So an average week, I drop the kids at school. Most days I try and do about 45 minutes of exercise. So I might come back, do a bit of yoga, and then I'd sit down in front of my desk and I'd go through my emails. I might be preparing the course that I have to deliver the next day.
And therefore my work was mainly outside, recording to outside studios. And at home, I'd be doing my online boutique.
I mean, it was just full on. It was like sort of, I don't know, 6 a.m. rises, out the door. Like, because often you'd be dressing sets before filming, or you'd have to be on set for 7. And then you just go through all day, basically.
So originally I had a desk in my bedroom, which I'm in now, in the corner, and it was nice. But obviously once lockdown, everyone was coming in and interrupting, and when you're doing glass work, you know, you don't need them interruptions because accidents happen.
No, I didn't have an office at home. I've never really had a designated office at home. I would normally just take my laptop and work on the dining room table, or sometimes on my bed, actually, just because it's comfy.
I used to work on my bed a lot until John put this desk in, or on the kitchen table, wherever was lightest, wherever the sun was.
I very quickly left the studio and started to work in my bedroom, which is where I am now.
So I had my space, but the thing is I've now got an even bigger space to myself because of everything we've changed. I mean, to myself, it's not quite to myself, but it is, and it's much nicer.
I had a desk in with the kids, like the sort of playroom. I don't think it was ever considered my space.
Yeah, but I do definitely feel the lack of a place to call my own. I don't feel like I have a place to call my own, and I definitely crave it.
So my creative space shrank to my spare room, which is I call it my studio. It's like all my workshops, everything else shut down. And I think quite quickly I went online.
The whole point about this space was, in my mind, I paint in oils, so they don't dry very quickly. And you have to be able to leave it out. You can't pack it all away. And it's that from the creative process, you can't always pack it away because you have to get it all out again. 2 things kind of happened at the same time. One, I was actually able to start painting and not put everything away all the time. And also to just not have to share an office and stare at a wall. That's how I ended up down here.
So I think that I still had, so I've been pretty lucky. I had a small room, which was technically the office. And originally the idea was that Jack and I shared it, but he never liked sitting at a desk to work. So in the end, it was basically, I had my own office. So I would work up there.
So I set up a table in the bedroom, which actually was much calmer. And I put my sewing machine there. But then actually the sewing machine very quickly got sideswiped onto the floor. And H has now claimed that
I definitely, you know, I do feel like a lot of my creative energy is kind of used up and soured by a constant fight against clutter and a constant, you know, it sort of goes into this sort of manic tidy up woman mode who just tidies up all the time and never ever gets tidy, but just carries on doing it.
My husband doesn't see it. And I'm just like, how can you not? Like, he will just, it'll be a complete mess downstairs. He'll just carry on. And I get it. It's in a way, it's like, I want to be that focused. It's not actually that I'm bothered that he hasn't done anything. I'm just feel like, how can you just be like all blasé about it and just then carry on? Because in my head, I'm like, I can hear the washing machine beeping. Those things need to be hung out. And I'm writing. I'm like, just write for another 5 minutes. And I can still hear it beeping. I'm just like, just go and do it.
I'm not really interested in any of the household duties that I'm supposed to do. So they didn't really enter into my mind. And so I would just focus on my creative process.
And I remember really well, it was a Tuesday morning, I put the coffee on the stove, get a phone call, it's the school. And I feel like I'll never forget it. The woman goes, yes, I'm afraid Tom's coughing in class. You have to come and get him. And I was like, what do you mean? Like Tom coughing in class? But I mean, Tom always coughs. And I felt like the kind of mum, you know, who's looking for any excuse.
I felt the wind coming. So about a week before we got locked down, I ordered parts to basically create a small studio at home. Right. I drove to Soho with it sort of all stuck in my car. I'd call an engineer saying, can you please help me? I've just opened the box and I don't even know what to do with these things. Like, oh, please help me. So he said, yeah.
There's a space outside. We've got like an outbuilding, and it was a dumping ground. So it's like, right. So I ordered a shed. I built a shed by myself. So I moved all the dump stuff into that shed, and I gutted this work, which is now my workshop. So in the summer it was lovely. I'd sit out there and the children were in the garden. So we're all still connected, but I could also shut the door if I needed to.
Literally up until I gave birth, I was doing stuff like connecting with people in Cambridge, connecting with people in Hong Kong, which is like, wow, you know, connecting with people in Malta, and just, so like, you know, it's like little, in terms of the space shrunk to my studio, but it also opened up virtually.
I remember feeling, above all else, pretty anxious. And in that first week of being home, just being quite ratty and quite angry and annoyed with everything.
And though huge numbers are complying, and I thank you all, the time has now come for us all to do more.
First time it did feel like everybody went into crisis mode, and it was quite exciting. It was certainly, I found, very energizing, creatively energizing, massively. Because all of a sudden we had loads of this stuff to write about, and it was just, you know, the world seemed to be imploding.
And I have to say, like, a really selfish thing is that when lockdown happened, I was like, oh, this is brilliant, because the rest of the world now feels like I do. Yeah. Because there isn't, like, acting's gone very quiet and it's all very slow moving. I'm like, this is my speed. Yeah.
Sometimes I was in denial, and sometimes I was in a panic about it. So one thing I did was I went over to my parents' house. Obviously I wasn't allowed to go inside, and I took a massive canvas and I started to paint the tree in their garden, because I suddenly thought that they were going to die, the house would be sold, and I wouldn't be able to be there again.
I don't think any of us believed it was going to go on this long. Now it's become, I don't find it energizing anymore.
And I just remember being absolutely frazzled, overwrought, thinking, oh my God, this is a nightmare. The kids are going to kill each other. I'm going to kill them. This is never going to work. I can't do this. And I remember sitting me and Tom and Olivia around. The first thing I did was like sit us around the kitchen table and go, right, we're going to write down a list of all the things that we think are going to be really good about lockdown and all of the things that are going to be really difficult. And then we'll look at each other's lists. And the only one I really remember thinking, they've got to get this, they've got to understand this, was me. And I wrote, Mummy's going to find it really hard not to have any time for herself.
La 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 la.
I think in a sense we probably the pandemic feelings are probably most familiar to us, particularly women who in a sense have very recently come out of the thick of being mothers. And I certainly feel that way myself. You know, I sort of feel like, wow, I'd literally just caught a breath. We're back in again, and you know, just started to build something again, started to get back into the world as I saw it, and then bam. I remember the first day of the first pandemic, I pretty much screamed and ran out of the house and said, "You don't understand. I can't do this on my own." And I was like, "No, it's not happening." So I didn't man up to that very much, woman up to it. Yeah.
So he would have been 5 basically in that first lockdown, and he'd really only just started going to school for full time. So I'd had that period from September through to March, so 6 months, where I'd reclaimed some of my time as a mum, having not had it for so long. And then they come home, and I was quite selfishly thinking like, oh God, like, yes, this needs to be done. Yes, it might be quite exciting, but how on earth am I going to do the stuff that I need to do and teach my kids at the same time?
In ancient Greek times, ladies were prizes and were told what to do, but nowadays women can make up their minds about who they want to marry. Paris had an impossible choice to make. He had to choose between 3 goddesses.
Okay. So now you're going to move on to why was it bad that he chose Aphrodite? Beatrice. You could say he was bound to upset, nobody wants to upset a goddess, or he was bound to upset.
He was bound to upset 2 of the goddesses.
Okay, write that down before you forget it.
So yeah, it was really interesting. Last time it was lockdown, we set up the timetable and we stuck to it as best we could and everything. But I remember the feeling of, oh my God, we've got to do it again. Like the next day, oh my God. And again, it was just such a trial.
We made Lara sit down and write us a timetable for every week, which bless her, she did. And it had the most bonkers things in it. And it was just too much. Scout got bored and fed up. And now it's just very simple. It's just, well, in the morning we'll do city downy stuff. And in the afternoon, we get them out of the house if we can.
I just changed my day so that I'd start with the kids at sort of 9 o'clock doing Joe Wicks. And then, I mean, why did we do so much Joe Wicks? Again, now I'm thinking that was just stressful. And then I would finish with the kids at around 3 o'clock. And then I would start my own work with a break for dinner until 1 in the morning. And that was really tough.
That's the one thing for me. I'm not very good with routine. I don't particularly like routine. Routine kind of frightens me and kind of, I don't like it.
It's the same. Every day is the same. I was finding myself just staring at John going, he sort of said to me yesterday, what should we have for dinner? I thought, oh God, we got to do that again. We've got to eat again. Oh God. Then we've got to go to bed again. And then we've got to bath, then we got to have breakfast again. It's the same every day. What's the point?
There's some mad moments, there's really quite dark and sad and scary moments. There's moments, that you can see that all we've done in that one day is just stay in our dressing gowns because we can't be bothered to face the day. But then there's other days you can see me, I fell over in the bushes because I'm trying to put a shed up on my own, you know.
You can't go to a soft play, which I don't think I've ever felt like I was going to say this, but I know you were talking about fantasizing about something. I've fantasized so much about a soft play and having a really bad coffee and just a really crappy sandwich and watching your kids just go wild and, you know, find random stuff in the ball pool. I fantasize about that.
The great thing about this room now is that the actual doorknob is broken on the other side. Well, it's not broken, it's just it just went. So we haven't put it back. So you actually can lock yourself in that room without anyone being able to open it from the outside. So sometimes it can feel like a bit of an escape. However, you do get some messages pushed under the door. Mummy, when are you finished? Mummy, are you still in there?
The biggest thing for me getting used to was no longer ever having the house to myself. And that silence, that space, that silence space. And I would say that, yeah, that for me is what I associate with having space.
Notably, East and Southeast Asian elders in the US, although we have seen a lot of incidents in the UK.
I've been a lot better about saying to him, I need, 3 hours sometimes when I only need 2.5. And going to Sainsbury's for a shop, but sitting in the car for 15 minutes and listening to the radio, because you just have to build in these, you have to build in a bit of self-care.
And what I'm keen to understand from you is how this has changed over the past few months. I mean, we've had comments from the likes of...
What she wants is me to go and dress her Barbies with her or do scenarios. And I do try if I can, but often or I'm like, losing my mind. So I just need to go and have a cup of tea and hide in the toilet or something, for a minute.
It's supposed to be a family living room. And the idea is where I worked while the kids are at school. But of course, because there is no school, it's become where I hide. Olivia comes and sits here and does her schoolwork in here. Okay. I basically get nothing done most of the day, but I do sit in here and pretend that I'm doing some work.
But that has been the main thing. Like, you sit down to work and you really need to, and also I felt like you really need to concentrate. And then it's like, I would say max, I probably get 10 minutes. I'm talking to myself. Yes.
If I find a gun, then I get the bullets. Not for the whole thing. Gun, and then they just, because the bullet engine head's gone as a gun.
He's taking your bullets.
No, he's taking the gun and the bullets in it. Because he said, I think
Are there no more guns? But sorry, Isabel. Are there no more guns?
No, I get it. I totally get it. Trust me.
There's no more bullets. Well, go and get him. Go and ask him to give you half the bullets. So Mummy has said.
Then they're just going to shoot me because Ness has a double laser and my gun and another gun. Jim has it.
Okay, so I think maybe I should come and take all the guns, because if it's causing like a big problem, then maybe it's better to put them away and do something else. Listen, I'll come in 5 minutes and I'll come and get them, okay? And then you can find something else to do. Because it's interesting, because I would say it's almost like also how much value you put on yourself. Like I
you see them coming down with
Do either of them come in like if you're working and the door's shut?
Yeah, and Mark very rarely. He's extremely respectful. Poppy, of course, does. And I hear them arguing, don't go in there, Mummy's working. I just want to ask her. Don't that? And I'm like, just what is it, sweetie? And then normally it's quick. To be fair, she just, you know, they just want to make sure they can still connect with you. I think children, don't they? You're still there, but it's so tempting. You're just in that room.
And I turned music on, and Michael laughed at me. They came down to get something out of the shed, and I was singing like an absolute. I mean, I love singing and dancing, you know, and I don't just have to do it when no one's watching. But I was singing away to God knows what, and he just sort of popped up at the window. I was like, no, that's not on. That's not on. If I'm down here singing, dancing like a lunar painting, you're not allowed to come and laugh at me, because it's my space and I can do whatever I like in it.
I'm worried about when we go back to normal, because it's like I have been on full pelt the whole time. So for a whole year I have pushed and pushed myself so hard, and I do worry that I'm just going to drop. But I think, well, no, it will, because we're doing a gradual change back into what we used to. I can keep myself going, but at a slower pace once they're back at school. So
how am I going to maintain some of this balance? Am I going to maintain some of, you know, I think we called it, you know, navigating coming out of lockdown? You know, like there's so many things we're going to need to look at. Some of them are emotional, some of them are practical, but something about, you know, what's worked in this environment and how to hang on to that.
In an ideal world, what would your working space look like?
Well, I'm imagining somewhere quite remote. I'm really craving to be somewhere near water, somewhere with quite a lot of nature around me, but also Wi-Fi. And a bit of alone time, but you know what, guilt-free alone time would be ideal.
But I'd love to have high ceilings and a really big window that looked out on the sea, I think. Yeah, the sea, probably more than anything. And I'd like a massive desk, like a really huge desk made out of wood, preferably. And I'd like bookshelves with all of my books up there, all my drama stuff and my writing books, with, you know, a really comfy chair or sofa. And I'd also like a day bed where I can have a nap.
When I was young, I used to fantasize about the Flashdance studio. Do you remember Flashdance, the film? I was in a warehouse, and it was a warehouse, but it was clean. And I just remember her fridge, and it just had Diet Coke in it.
I like this, but bigger. I don't. It's so much to do with my mental health, because I'm on the floor. I sit on the floor, or I work on the floor, or maybe on the bed, or maybe between the radiator and the bed. And that's where I feel secure. To stand up at an easel or at a wall in a big studio space would just be too scary for me. I mean, the work would benefit that, you know, being able to stand back from it and see it. But I would, so I'd have my bed in the corner and an intimate environment with my books and my things, and then I would have a bigger space nearby. But I would probably still spend most of my time in a small space.
A dream space in an idyllic season, so it would have to be like spring stroke summer, so it's not too hot, so that basically I could just have a penned field where the children could just play outside, and I could just, so I don't really have to look at them at all, but know that they're safe. So somewhere with lovely windows, with a nice outlook, nice sprung floor, so I can just play about physically if I want to. And people, I fucking want to work with people. I love collaborating. I love devising and being silly with other people in a room, and then being like, actually, that really works. Let's do that again. And, you know.
A sea view would be my ideal, like beautiful sea view with a massive sort of bay window or a terrace. I mean, that would be very inspiring for writing. Like the waves, the noises, the birds, the nature. I mean, that would be quite magnificent.
It would probably be sort of one of those co-working spaces, I think, maybe, because I do like people around me and I do like to hear people working, and that motivates me to work too. Then I also really love a chat and a bit of a, you know, God, I've had a really awful phone call with someone. God, can you believe it?
Overlooking the sea, but like a proper like studio, like open to the eaves, like rustic. I'd have a log burner. I'd have pictures everywhere. I'd have walls of books. Traveling to work is a really nice thing. Like, because actually I'm in my car quite a lot when I work, like moving between locations and stuff. That actually, oh, can you hear?
Yeah, it just yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah.
Like, so I quite like that. I quite like it to be enough distance where I could actually, you know, maybe almost get into your headspace before you get there.
I'm losing your.
You know, I don't know. I get.
Oh, I've lost you. You've frozen.